Hi, let's talk about how to improve tests thanks to the one line of code that all tests have in common, which is the name. So for the purpose of this presentation, let's consider a following example. This is a class age verification, which has a single method called passes, which accepts an age as a single argument and returns a boolean true or false, whether the age passed the verification or not. And now a typical starting point for testing such a piece of code that I often see in code bases is a test that's named after the functionality that's supposed to test. So it will be just test age verification. But such a name doesn't really help us test it extensively, isn't it? Can you think about edge cases when you start from such a test? Not really. When a moment of reflection comes around, we can see in the while that there are different suffixes added, like fail or error. But how they are really different from each other, we don't really know. And the interesting fact is that this is a really world example that I saw in one of the code bases, and I had no idea what these tests are checking really. It was that the test age verification was happy path, and these two fail and error were some error conditions. But as you can see, the name isn't really telling us anything specific. So the first piece of advice would be to avoid generalization in test naming. Be very specific about what are conditions. And now there are different conventions that were created to help with conveying more information in the test name. One of them is method under test scenario expected result, like this example, a verification. Method under test is of course passes. The scenario is 22 result person, and the expected result is returns true. Yeah, very precise, very mechanical, very unnatural. And another example is unit of work, state under test, expected behavior, which could write again, verification, 22 result person as a state under test, and expected behavior is the same, returns true. The thing that these two conventions have in common, and many other conventions as well, is that, well, they're not really for humans, are they? They don't write or read natural. Instead, we can convey the very same information, but using plain English sentences instead. So for example, test returns true for 22 result person and conveys really the same piece of information. Because what is being tested, here we can see in the test class name, test age verification, under what conditions. This is in the test name and this is for 22 result person, and expected outcome is returns true. But the difference is that now this is much more natural to write and read. Going back to the tests, they are indeed an executable specifications. They should be created when some requirements comes along or changes. And the names of the tests are summaries, which means we really should take care about them to be precise. And examples of imprecise language is using white noise words like must or should, where I should wake up early, but sometimes I fail. A test cannot allow for such indulgence, and sometimes you have only 80 characters in the line limit, so you should really count these keystrokes, right? And one last idea I wanted to talk about is a name-driven testing, which basically amounts to thinking about the test itself when writing the name for it. And one bad example of tests are the tests that impede refactoring, because they are testing and checking things that are not observable. What does it mean? I will show you. So let's see this test. Test registration succeeds returning details and saves the direct URL to database. The first thing you can notice, there is an end in the test name, which already is some kind of a code smell. But going back, the when implementation looks nice, but then in the assert, you have two groups of assertions. First one, just doing assertion about returned result, which is kind of nice. I have no objections about that. But then the second part is doing assertions about whether some object was saved in the database or not. And this isn't really a good idea to do such things on the level of API testing, because the fact that some object lands in the database is not visible on the level of the API. Instead, we should write some more elaborate scenario that a user registers, but then they are able to log in and maybe see their profile. Okay, so this is an idea of observable results. This is also a function of operating on a single level of abstraction. And that was the presentation about naming your tests better. I'm Sebastian Buczyński, and I blog under breadcrumbscollector.tech. Thank you.